Hey there everybody, before we get stuck into today's episode, I just want to put a very quick disclaimer out there. Talking about parenting in general has been something that it's always been a bit of a touchy subject to do on a podcast because, quite frankly, all kids are different. Even kids within the same family are different. And you know what? There's an abundance of advice on parenting out there, and some of it works for some people and others just generally don't. And it can be a very overwhelming world as a parent, and that's as a parent of neurotypical children. Today we are going to be talking about being a parent of neurodiverse children, particularly 2 children with autism. And I just want to put it out there that this entire episode is one family's viewpoint on how they do things. It is not a directional video on how anybody should live their lives, and it does take into account the fact that, again, all children are different, even within the same family. So I just want you to know that we've tried our best to do this episode with sensitivity and with compassion in mind, and understanding that your story and your situation may be very different from the situation that is here within. If you are looking for the answer to how to parent children with autism, that's not here. This is just their story, king and queen story, about how they run their household. And as they are very open about throughout the episode, it is a learning process that they're doing as they go along. If you ever do find that one video, which I don't believe probably exists out there, but I would love to know. And I would also love to hear about if you have experiences, if you're a parent of neurodiverse children yourselves. I would love to hear about those experiences too, either if that is in through the comments section on the YouTube video, or if you want to email me, it is dave@mindsetbydave.com if you are listening on the podcast and you want to get in touch that way, because I feel this is, the more of these stories that are out there, the better. All right, enjoy the episode. So, King, welcome to the podcast, and thanks for joining me this morning. Could you give us like a very brief introduction as to who you are, and then we'll delve into the depths.
You can see my name's Daniel King, but I go as King's Court on Twitch and everywhere else on the Twitter sphere and interwebs. I'm a variety streamer, but actually I like to say that I'm an entertainer. I don't like to say that I'm a variety streamer. I do play a variety of games, but I should be there to entertain you, and that's what I try to do. I am currently undergoing diagnosis for ADHD myself. My children, I have 2 children. One is 3, one is going to be 5 in the next couple of weeks. The one who's 5, one who will be 5, is stage 2 autism and ADHD. And my 3-year-old, who is our son, so Allegra, our daughter, is going to be 5 in October. She is stage 2 ADHD and stage 2 autism and ADHD. And Dante, who's our son, is 3 years old, and he is stage 3 autism and has severe GDD. For those who don't know what that is global development delay. So he's non-verbal, non-communicative, and trying to interact with him is very difficult. So yeah, that's like very, very quick catch up as to who I am.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I mean, that's going to be the primary conversation that we have today is about now, first of all, actually, well, I was about to say talking about being a parent of children with autism. Well, the question I want to get to first, which should be a reasonably quick one, is do you prefer sort of person first language or condition first language? So do you prefer person with autism or autistic person?
To me, it doesn't really make a difference. So long as we're talking about the person. Mm-hmm. You know, rather than it's just that autistic one there. You know what I mean? As long as we're talking about the person, for me it doesn't really matter. No, for me, there's no real difference in the language for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's a kind of, I suppose it's one of the biggest when talking about autism or any neurodivergence or even any mental illness or any disability. It's kind of a hot topic debate at the minute, and I've kind of found that the majority of people who have the condition themselves don't really care either way. And it's like, I don't mind if someone wants to call me a person with bipolar or a bipolar person. I mean, I just prefer it to call me Dave usually.
Yeah, exactly. But, as long as there's a personal aspect to it and it's not labeling the condition before labeling you or treating you as your condition. But yeah, as long as we're talking about the person.
Yeah. So, I mean, I will probably use both of those terms interchangeably throughout the rest of the interview for anyone who's listening. If you do have a preference on either way of that, essentially, I'll be trying to keep the conversation moving forward. And I am extremely sensitive to these things, but ultimately from what I've seen, there's no one definitive answer, and there's 50, it's like a 50-50 split. There's people actually that I saw a great sort of tweet about it the other day where a person said, this person was in favor of identity first, of condition first language, and with person with ADHD, because she said it's like saying you've got vanilla ice cream, you've got chocolate ice cream, she identifies basically as chocolate ice cream, not ice cream with chocolate. And she's like, ice cream with chocolate is a completely different thing from chocolate ice cream. Yeah. And there was a huge number of the neurodivergent community that basically followed in on that and agreed and saw it that way around. I mean, it's a bit different when it's ADHD, because you don't call someone an ADHDer or an ADHD person. But again, it's like it's again, just know, if anyone is listening to this, that we are sensitive to this, and we do care. We do care what your preferences are in terms of this, of course. But there's no global decision as to how we should do this just yet. So if we use any of those terms, please, don't let that detract from the conversation for you.
Yeah.
So, at what age did you first start noticing anything with Allegra?
Allegra was a little bit later. Allegra has grown to what society deems as quite normal rates, in terms of understanding, listening, reading, stuff like that. But it was only really when she was in nursery, wasn't it?
Yeah, there were delays with her language. So, but we felt that because she was quite accelerated in her movement.
Yeah.
We thought that maybe she was focusing on that aspect of her milestones and development.
So because she was moving, she was walking at walking and moving around at a very young age. She was very developed in that, and we kind of guessed that because she was moving very quickly with that the speech development was a little bit behind. But it wasn't like marginally behind. Like, she was still as I said, what society deems, or what the professionals deem as a little bit behind. But it wasn't until she was kind of in nursery, and we were talking to her teachers about what she was doing and stuff like that we then went about getting her diagnosed for anything, and that's when it all come out. So with her, it was a little bit more masked, and even to this day, with the autism side of things, it still is quite masked for her. So it's not very apparent right up until that something doesn't go her way, or until she has she has too much. She's over sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Overstimulated. Thank you, baby. She's overstimulated. No, thank you. And then all of a sudden, it becomes a little bit more apparent that she's not dealing with things very well.
Yeah. So when you say stage 2, could you kind of, for anyone who doesn't know what that means, could you explain what that means?
Yeah. So I don't even really understand the stages properly myself. Queen's put it in chat for us. 1 is moderate support required, 2 is substantial support required, and 3 is severe and complex needs. So with Allegra, stage 2, I suppose what it means for her is she understands you, she can communicate with you. There are issues with understanding and communication when things start to break down. But you can bring it back to a point of understanding. So support is required for and certain techniques are required to sit down, get her to breathe and understand that everything's okay, and then kind of bring her back to the room type thing. So that's what I get from that. But when it comes to these sort of stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, I'm not entirely sure what it means. I'm just using the terminology that I've been given by the medical professionals.
Okay. And what was the process like for getting to that diagnosis?
It's been ridiculous, but not in the way you'd think for Allegra. We really, really struggled with Dante, who, if you sat the kids next to each other, you'd instantly go, that child needs more help, instantly. But we struggled and still are struggling to get certain things in place for Dante. Whereas Allegra, during COVID, due to the fact that we got reports and stuff through, they basically diagnosed her over the phone.
Right.
We have twice as many for Dante.
But we had twice as much information and twice as much reports and people that Dante had seen. And yet even now we've got a diagnosis, but we're still trying to get a breakdown of that diagnosis. They're like, he's on the spectrum for autism. And it's like, okay, but whereabouts does he sit? Oh, we can't do that yet. Well, why not? So it can be quite. It really depends on. I think it depends on who you get looking at your case and who you have supporting your case. Sometimes it can be a real struggle, and I know that from a lot of people that I've spoke to who've been in the same situation, there is quite a struggle to it. And then other times, if you hit that lucky stride, like we did with Allegra, it's a lot easier.
Okay, so once you kind of like started noticing the development with the speech, what was that? Was that who was it the professionals that potentially suggested and recommended an autism assessment at that point, or was it something you had to push for yourselves?
No, with Allegra, it was definitely more the professionals that started to sort of say to us, this is what we think it might be, these are the reasons, and then we started looking into it, and then we went down the path of going for a diagnosis. We're very sort of proactive parents. So if we think there's an issue, or if we think there's something that we need to be dealing with, we make sure that we're dealing with it. We definitely got on to all the right people. We were speaking to speech and language. We were, talking to medical professionals and school, and so we were very proactive in that respect. But due to the fact that we're not medical professionals ourselves, we kind of left the diagnosis in their hands and said, right, these are the things we're noticing, these are the things at school we're noticing, and we made sure to bring all of that together. And we've done the same with Dante. It's all about making sure that everyone's speaking. We're trying to be the bond that holds everything and puts everything together, so that we can do what's right for the kids at the end of the day. But so it was the medical professionals that gave us the diagnosis. Okay,
so with Dante, what were the kind of what was the age that Allegra was when you this was first kind of flagged?
Allegra was what, 2?
She was 2.5. No, she just turned 3.
Yeah. So, but when we started to notice, 2.
Yeah, because I took her in when she was about 18 months old. No, about 2. I took her into the paediatrician, didn't I?
Yeah. So about 2 for Allegra.
Okay. And that had been around about the time that Dante was born as well.
Yeah, not far off. Yeah.
Okay. So with Dante, what were the kind of was it like? I mean, basically, for anyone in the world that's got 2 kids, that. Despite the fact that they both completely and utterly share yours and your partner's DNA, they are completely different right from the start. But was there kind of any similarities, or was there any others? Like, what were the kind of first signs that Dante was struggling?
Dante, for me, it was a really early. It was really early on that I started to notice it, and then I brought it to Queen's attention. And we weren't too sure, because obviously you've got that really weird stage of baby, haven't you, where are you being overprotective? Are you looking into it too much? Are you being neurotic? Is it because it's a new baby? But so it was before a year that I noticed with Dante. And for me, it was the level of interaction. So you'd be playing with him and you'd be looking at him, and it was this complete void of stare, really, like this staring into the void. It was like you were trying to get his attention, and it happens. Like, I'm not saying every baby is going to be looking directly at you every time and every minute of the day. But yeah, there was a case of I noticed it and I was like, look, this is something we need to keep an eye on. And then it was about 18 months that we left it like nearly a full year. And it was 18 months that we then started to try and push for him to be seen by medical professionals, and start getting the ball rolling, because we'd been reading all these things. And I mean, you can read everything on the internet and it's never a good thing to do. But we made sure we were doing our research and we were reading all these things, and we were making sure we were on the right path. We weren't Googling it and, trying to find out if we were dying and stuff. But yeah, and also we've got quite a bit of experience. So Queen's brother is autistic, and he has quite severe autism, and then my brother's autistic too. So we have knowledge of it, but what we were trying to do is balance out whether our our knowledge was clouding our judgment.
Yeah. And
so that's why we waited a full year to see. But it didn't change. In fact, he was missing so many developmental milestones, and not by a little. So I'm a bit cautious of developmental milestones, just because children are people, but children especially, they grow at their own rates and they have their own things they should be doing. And I know that the developmental milestones are averages of certain things, and that they're just little markers that we should be keeping an eye on. But he was missing loads, and there was points where, I mean, even now he doesn't talk still. And so 18 months we tried to start the process with Dante, and we found it was literally impossible. Every time we spoke to someone, he's too young. And it's like, but you can see what we're seeing. Like, yes, we can. He's too young. And I completely understand that there is a level or a bar where people need to sort of set and go, right, you need to wait. But we were getting that even till up until recently. So it's only been recently we've started to have development. So he's 3 now, and we're only just starting to see developments, and we were being told he's too young. It's like, okay, but at what point do we get the early sort of intervention in? Because we were reading all these studies about early intervention. Early intervention can be really important, and help to not stop but aid in some of the things that could in later life cause more and more issues.
Do you tell them what the doctor said to me when I first took him in?
Oh, do you want me to say it?
Do you want me to, or do you want
No, I'll say it. So the first time Queen took Dante in to one of the doctors in our local GP service, and we were talking about it. I think it was like the second or third appointment or something. It wasn't. We were told we were being silly. He's far too young, and it was our parenting, and we needed to read a book. Wait for it. We needed to read a book called Taming the Toddler. Can you imagine King's response to that? Can you imagine Daniel's response to that?
For the people just listening on audio, I maybe just threw up in my mouth a little bit. It's like that answer gave me physical pain.
I was fuming. I was absolutely fuming. So Queen came home. She was crying her eyes out, and obviously that's not going to help because I want to protect her. But then I'm being told that we're not suitable parents, and that our child's sort of neurological issues are not there. They're fabricated. And I was going wild. I was pacing around the house, and I'm like, I'm going down there, and then Quinn's like, no, you can't go down. I'm like, I'm going down there. Oh,
I mean, like, it's gaslighting within the mental health industry is like a whole extra layer.
I know.
And it makes me quite angry, even just as, you know, as a friend hearing that. We had someone in the stream a couple of weeks back, and basically and often neurodivergence on a whole, not just people with autism, but neurodivergence on a whole can mask around certain individuals and around their family and around their parents or the people they love the most. That's the only time the mask truly comes off, you know?
Yeah.
And we had one such person in our chat a few weeks back saying that the school had essentially the behavioral issues, he says in air quotes, the school had basically said she needed to be a tougher parent and all the rest of it. And it's like, she knew herself that if she was to be tough when her child was having his breakfast, that can be, well, I use the Kung Fu Panda quote for this. Often we meet our destiny on the path we choose to avoid it. The path we're choosing to, you know, what we want to do is get the child ready for school, and ready for school doesn't mean you're in your school uniform. It means you're in the right mindset to be able to go through those doors and be able to learn to the best of your own individual subjective abilities. And so ready for school isn't you're dressed and you've had your breakfast. It's not just those things. But that was like, if she was to push to get him ready faster, that would be a very triggering experience for him. And then, you know, then she'd be 20 minutes late for school with a child that has essentially been unable to contain their own anger or their own frustration.
Sets up the day, doesn't it? It sets up the day to be on a downward slope.
Yeah, and that's the headspace that child's going into school in. Whereas if she takes the time to actually let him do things at his own pace and gently get him there, yes, he might end up there later than what might be more tardy on the register or whatever. Yeah. But he's there in a headspace where he's actually calm and able to learn. And it's like, and all they said was, you just need to be tougher on him. And it's like, and because he's, you know, not as obviously autistic in school as he is at home. And again, because even people with autism or people with ADHD learn to mask, and they learn to so, you know, we get socialized, so to speak, to, you know, again, to varying degrees, but what you always see isn't always what the family have seen. And the family of the person, you know, like the family are often the best judge in all of this. It's like in fact, even down to last week, we talked about this, about the idea, because I have bipolar disorder, and my bipolar disorder is hardly ever at its worst by the time I get to a doctor's appointment. So I actually have to tell the doctor how I've been, not how I am. Because how I've been is what I need to be treated for. How I am right now, I can be absolutely fine, thanks to the wonders of rapid cycling, but I can be like absolutely fine when I walk through that door. And the doctor bases it and judges it on what they see in front of them for that.
You've got to work on worst case scenario, haven't you? Which you shouldn't have to, but you then go, right, what is the absolute worst day I've had in the last 6 months? And then you work it based on that, because otherwise you ain't getting help.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing as well is, I mean, mine get taken unseriously sometimes because my depressive episodes can be really intense, but they can be over like a light switch has just gone off in like a day or 3 days. Sometimes they can last for 6 months. But each one of those episodes is just as serious as a 6-month one. It just doesn't last as long. Exactly. I'm as much of a risk to myself in that time as I would have been in the midst of a 6-month one. Yeah. And as a result, it needs to be taken seriously. But we are simultaneously the best judges of ourselves and the worst judges of ourselves, because we can't be impartial. But at the same time, we've seen more of it. But I was really, really kind of, you know, despite my disgust for what the doctors said, what I was super impressed with what you said is the fact that you've seen so much throughout, you know, both of the brothers of yourself and Queen. And you did your best to kind of say, right, I understand that this might push my brain towards something. This might want me to, you know, automatically self-diagnose. And you recognize that. and took what I think of, as being an extremely kind of rational approach, even if not even maybe a little bit too cautious. So to then be told that to then be told on the back end of that you're thinking of it, you're kind of thinking into this too much. I'm like, yeah, I've just spoken to you for like 10 minutes about this, and I can already figure out that you're actually doing what you can to stop yourselves from racing towards the conclusion. You're trying to stop yourselves from making a conclusion that is already there and give it time. So yeah, it's hard. I know I'm not the bloody doctor that said it, but I'm sorry. I'm sat here feeling like I want to apologize for every human that's ever wronged you.
I appreciate that, but no, thankfully that's partly in the past. Now we know for a fact that this isn't going to be an isolated event. This is going to happen throughout Dante's life, and what was the stuff?
It's like everything with Dante, with Allegra, it's been.
With Allegra, it's been so easy, but with Dante, we know this is going to be throughout his life, and we're ready to deal with it as and when. Thankfully, I'm not afraid to open my mouth and tell people when they need to sit down and shut up.
Good. I mean, it's one of the most cruel things about mental health or the mental health system or the neurodivergence system in healthcare in our country, and probably in many other countries as well, is how strongly you're expected to advocate for yourself when. It's like, I don't have the capacity to brush my teeth right now. It's like, and you want me to sit here and fully explain to you why you should take this more seriously. It's like the fact that I can't sit here and explain to you, like anxiety being a big one. It's like, and a person in the doctor's office doesn't open up because their anxiety is making them terrified. It's like, as a doctor, can you not see that potentially anxiety is causing their current anxiety and their inability to talk to you about their anxiety? It's like, can you not go the extra mile for this person who's already going 10 extra miles and struggling? It's mind-boggling. But and then I'm like, oh, they must have their reasons. Like, you go and speak to all the young doctors, and they're all convinced that they're gonna change this. And you go and speak to all the old doctors, and they were like, I was like that once. It's like what are they?
I was a wide-eyed buck like you once. Then I took an arrow to the knee.
I was about to go Skyrim Tavern, someone said that in my chat a few weeks back, and I'd forgotten about that line. And I because I'm so used to anyone. Basically, my principle is if someone comes into my chat and tells me something, I believe them, because we run a mental health stream. So the thing is, if I go down the route of treating everything with a pinch of salt, I'm gonna accidentally miss somebody that actually really needs help. Whereas I'd literally rather my chat turn around to me and say, "Oh, you're so silly. It's a line from Skyrim, or maybe it was a line from Oblivion. I can't remember. It's one of them two." Yeah. And I was like, and as soon as someone said it, I can literally see the character and hear the tone of voice that the person said it in. As soon as I'm like, oh yeah, but yeah, I'm like that sounds really painful to this person. I'm like, what happened? Where were you? That there were arrows? I'm like literally taking this person 100% seriously, because they could have been coming in and it could have been genuine. So I said basically the worst thing that happens if I take someone serious when they're not is I have egg on my face and everyone can have a good laugh at me. The worst thing that happens if I don't take someone serious and they are is that a person feels invalidated, and I'm like, I will take all the egg on my face.
Definitely to be the other way around.
Yeah, exactly. Before I go down the route of invalidating anybody, and that comes like full circle to literally what we've just been talking about. Is that experience must have been so invalidating for you? It's that this person with a brief, what's the word? Assessment is kind of
barely an assessment. Just literally walked into the office. There wasn't an assessment. There was a judgment already based the moment the appointment was made. 18-month-old, possible autism.
Yeah.
The shields were up, and I think the anger wasn't. It was there was the anger was twofold. It wasn't just the fact that our parenting was being called into question, because that's a very personal attack, and also it was made to feel personal. But it was also the fact that, as you said, they were invalidating the experience that we had with our son. And all we wanted to do was help our son. If it would have been a case of, this isn't autism because X, Y, Z, blah, 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 1, 2, 3. And they were able to give us a rolled out reason as to why, then maybe we would have listened. But to instantly invalidate it and go, no, it's just your parenting, when, okay, you know, we're not perfect, but what parent is? Yeah. But we definitely try really damn hard to do what we can do, and to try and make the experience of our children better than the experiences we had, but also the best experience that we can make for them. And that doesn't mean that we give them absolutely everything. We try and make sure that they're disciplined and they got their boundaries, and that, you know, and when I say discipline, by the way, I don't mean beating them. I just mean they get up, they go to bed, they're routine.
That's not where my mind went, but
yeah. And it depends on your terminology of disciplined. I know some people have so yeah, but yeah, so that's the anger was twofold. It was slightly personal, but I think the anger came more from the fact that our child was being completely swept under the rug, and their experiences that they couldn't tell the doctor about were being ignored. Yeah. And I think that's the whole thing, is that you think, once you become a parent, you suddenly realize just how defensive you can become, because it's like my two kids are the two people that I would probably do the most for. If anybody ever hurt them, that'd be like, I've always been like a little bit more about that, like the only people that have ever really upset me in my life have hurt other people in my life. So, like people who've hurt my mum or people who've hurt my brother or whatever it might be, I'm a lot more defensive of them. But then with my kids, it's like, you know what? If you're not helping my kid get the support they need, it's like I'm much better at standing up for them than I am for myself. Yeah. In terms of kind of like what are some of the things that you need to do to kind of the sort of adaptations you need to make as a parent in order to look after your two children? It's difficult, and being a parent has its difficulties. I'm not trying to say that my experience is any more or less difficult than anyone else's, but the reason we find things quite difficult, and I do mean it, that we're good parents, but we still find things difficult, is that we have two children on completely opposite sides. So we have a child who wants to play, who is hyperactive, who can talk, explain themselves, and then has meltdowns when things don't go their way and when they don't understand certain things. We have that side, and then we've got the child that we cannot communicate with unless it's very, very basic, like handing them a plate or handing them a bottle, or there's and trying to figure out their needs sometimes takes a little bit more priority than on this side. But that's because we need to spend more time figuring that out. We do try to make sure they are both given ample amount of time each, and that they're given all of the attention and space that they can to do what they want to do. But what sort of the things that we put in place, or the things we try to do, is we have got Allegra doing breathing exercises and using the word calm for when she starts getting a little trying to find the right word, for when she starts her emotions start to run high. Mm-hmm. When her emotions starts to run high, she
can't process them all.
Because she has a bit of trouble processing them. We've got into a system of getting her to either sit or stand and take deep breaths in, and then as she's breathing out, she'll say calm. So it's like a little mantra thing going on to help her get back into the moment and figure out what's going on up here, and to slow the cogs down a little bit so it's less emotive. With Dante, it is just a system of going through what his needs are. Does he need a nappy change? Is he hungry? Does he need a bottle? Does he need to sleep? And it is literally, it's like having a 6-month-old baby, going through those processes constantly of, is it nappy? Is it food? Is it sleep? Is it, what is it? And you go through those processes. And yeah, they're the two main things that we've put in place. I say put in place with Dante, it's just what we do. But they're the two main things that we do to try and work with the children and figure out what their needs are. I don't like, apart from that, I suppose it's kind of difficult as well, because it's just what we do. It's what you do on a daily basis. You just get up and you do it. Like, it's like trying to say, what are your greatest achievements, or what's your strengths in an interview, and you're like, I have strengths. But yeah, so I off the top of my head, they're the main two things we do. But also with Dante, there's a lot of physical interaction. So a lot of getting down to his level, cuddles, playing, and making sure that he's got access to your hands so that he can kind of push your hands to things. But yeah, I can't really think of much else. There probably is stuff, but I don't think of it. It's just stuff we do, I suppose.
Yeah, awesome. I've literally just had a question coming from chat. I normally I'd wait till the end, but this one fits perfectly with where we are in the interview right now. What is your advice for new parents who may be seeing the early signs of autism or developmental delays?
Yeah, follow your gut. Make notes, make loads of notes. Start speaking to your GP. See if you can get speech and language in. If they're in a nursery. Whose interview is this?
I don't know.
Queen, come on. I was tempted to be like, can the pair of them, can we get you both in here?
But
I'll end up talking over you.
Yeah, but
it's fine.
If nursery or school, if I know obviously a new parent, but if they're in a nursery, or if they're in a school, or if they're in daycare or something, they can be really, really pivotal in getting advice and help. And Dante's nursery have been absolutely fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. They're called Oasis, and they are beyond fantastic. Honestly, they've done so much to help us. They've written so many reports. They've had speech and language in. They've spoken to speech and language over countless times. So yeah, nurseries, speak to your GP, see if you can get speech and language involved. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Just because they're your child and just because you're the parent, don't be afraid to ask for help. You're going to need it. Let's be serious. You're going to need it. If you are noticing developmental delays, if you're noticing sort of neurodiverse behavior, or whatever it might be, definitely ask for help, because sleep when you have children is something that is gold dust, absolute gold dust. But it's made even more so when you have these things sort of come up, and you're dealing with these sort of things as a parent.
Yeah. So when we talked on your show last week, that I'm kind of a big fan of the expression "carers need care too," and I want to kind of focus on that for a minute and just say, what is kind of some of the things that yourself or Queen have gone through by experiencing this? Because a lot of times when you are dealing with a person with complex needs, and again, that can be whether that is autism, or that can be disabilities, that can be emotional needs like mental health issues. The people who are caring, often it's like, well, you're the ones who are caring. This is the person that needs the extra help. When in reality, it's like, actually, we need help at every kind of every rung in the chain. What have been some of the difficulties that you've been through yourself in terms of this being your reality?
it's difficult to. So there's this kind of balancing act we're trying to do at the moment, with dealing with the children's diagnosis and going through their needs and making sure they get what they want, trying to make sure that we're running the household as, you know, good parents, and they get to school and and we're also at the same time trying to break cycles of our own issues from our past and our own childhoods. And there's this massive balancing act. So I'm constantly questioning my parenting. But this would have happened whether the kids were neurodiverse or neurotypical or no disabilities or like. So I'm constantly battling with the idea of, am I repeating cycles? And I know I'm not. I know I'm not, because I definitely, one, wouldn't, because that's not me, and two, Queen would kick my ass. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing. Like she pulls me up when I start doing stuff wrong in personal life, or if she thinks I'm going a little too far with, you know, telling the kids off and we all talk about that. We talk about it all the time. So we've got this delicate balancing act, which you're always questioning yourself, always, and that makes things difficult. But then when, you know, when you're tired, and when you've been up to Dante 5 times in the night, which is, I suppose, average is 3 times a night. Wake ups 3 times on average. But
we have to change them as well.
Yeah, so, yeah. And then, you know, Allegra has night terrors, so sometimes we wake up to her. So sleep is a real problem. Sleep is a real problem. And then trying to do that balancing act when you are shattered, when the last thing you're really thinking about is, you know, how many balls am I juggling right now? It's I need to get up, I need to get ready, I need to go to school, I need to get the kids to school, they're going to be late. So that's difficult, and we don't get a lot of help, if I'm being honest. We from our support network is incredibly small, and quite a lot of the time we're very isolated to just me and Queen. But we work incredibly well together. As I said, she pulls me up if I'm being grumpy, or if I'm, you know, or if I'm in a mood, and I will tell her if, you know, I think you know, she needs to take a moment, or if things are, you know, aren't going the right way, or if I didn't like a decision, or whatever it might be. We sit down and we go, right, cool, can we talk about this in a minute? And we try to do it not in the moment, because obviously, well, we were talking about this last week, so being important. In the moment. Yeah, being in the moment, you try and go, oi, that's not right, and this is why it's not right. If I mean, obviously, if there's something going on, like you say, oi, go chill for a sec, please. And it's like, no, you go chill for a sec, please. And then we're going to talk about it in a minute when you calm down, or outside of that moment. But yeah, so we are quite isolated. That is very difficult. Trying to get some time to just us. I can probably say I can count on one hand how many times we've had a moment to ourselves since Allegra was born. So you're looking at nearly 5 years. I can count the amount of times we've had to ourselves, like even an hour. Like, I'm not talking like a whole night, I'm talking an hour. I can count it on one hand. So to say we're isolated, I think that kind of points out, in 5 years, we've had probably less than 5 occasions where we've been able to do our own thing, and not be parents for a moment. So yeah. So that's difficult. But they're the 2 main difficulties. The emotional responses, or the behavioral responses with the children, yes, whilst they can be difficult, one, you start to get to know it and you get used to it. And 2, you know that 9 times out of 10, the children can't help it. Yeah. So you understand that, and you deal with it. So the behavioral or the emotional aspect of what they're going through and how they react to things is a lot lesser than some of the issues that you have with, being isolated, or the other one, the stresses of chasing up medical professionals and trying to get them to believe you. That we have been, I say we, it's mainly been Queen, because obviously I was running a business up until recently. And Queen's a lot better at this than I am, but that is going to be my job now that I'm going to be the main carer. Chasing up people and asking for diagnosis letters, or trying to get appointments and trying to make sure they stick to appointments and they're not cancelling appointments like they did 3 times for Dante. And making sure that people are on the same wavelength. It is constant fighting, especially when the child is, I don't want to say quite severe, but, on the other end of the spectrum where things are more difficult. Trying to make sure that everyone's singing to the same hymn sheet and that you're getting all the help is a battle in itself. And you don't get any help for that. So you're trying to battle for help, which you don't then have until you finish that battle, and then you've got to continue with that afterwards anyway. So that's quite stressful. So that I would say, the battling, the sleeplessness, and the isolation.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that. I think it's important that as well, because any other parents in this situation out there, it can be so easy to fall into the trap of feeling guilty for you not handling it. And in reality, it's like, let's face it, none of us are kind of out the box ready to handle for want of a better word, normal life or standard life. And it's like, and as you've said there, and I think it's very, amazing that you acknowledge that, is the fact that is, you're not sitting there and saying you've got it harder or better or whatever than other parents. It's just you've got it different than other parents. And parenting can be a huge. Well, it's just a different experience. It's not just a different experience from family to family. It's a different experience from child to child.
Exactly,
and
completely.
Both of my, and the other thing as well is, which is going to sort of lead on to my next question, is that both of my kids were assessed for autism through CAMS in high school. And I was not in a great place myself at the time when the eldest one's assessment first got put through. And my very first thing, because of me being neurodivergent myself, was to blame myself. And now this is a long time before I started telling people we don't guilt ourselves into greatness. But that was a lot. There was a lot of internalized kind of like stigma, basically mental health stigma that I'd not personally dealt with, that led to that. I know for yourself, is it almost the other way around? If I've got that right, that actually the kid's diagnosis has led you to kind of look a little bit more inwards, and that's one of the reasons that you're on the ADHD journey yourself right now.
So Allegra was diagnosed with ADHD sort of on the.
She's on the pathway.
Yeah, she's on the pathway, but it was off the back of her autism diagnosis, and there are a lot of traits that are very similar in the way that she acts. In the way that I was going to say the way that I acted, but I still act like it. So I still act like a child most days. But
hey, it was a happy times.
Exactly. But I was literally, if you name some of the things that when you're on TikTok and you're going through and they talk about were you the poster child for success, but you couldn't be bothered, all these things, and
I like to put a finger down once.
Yeah, and have you been called gifted if only you listen more? Have you been called smart but you need to pay more attention? Have you been called a good student but you need to distract people less? I had all of those. My school reports coming back from primary school through to high school were all great student needs to listen more, great student needs to draw less, great student needs to do this, gifted but if they only did X, Y, and Z. It was always good but something. But I grew up in an era where you weren't ADHD, you were just a hyperactive little shit.
Yeah.
and I needed to calm down. I needed to listen more. I needed to do everything other than for people to understand that my brain didn't work in the same way that most people's do.
Yeah.
So, I know actually I was going to mention this earlier when you're talking about services and getting help and how we look at it. But yeah, so I started the process, and it took me ages to speak to my doctor, and it took Queen about 5 different times to go, "You're going to speak to your doctor this week. You're going to speak to your doctor this week." And I was like, yeah. And 3 of those 5 times I ignored it. 2 of those 5 times, admittedly, I was like, yeah, I'm going to do it. And then I went, "Ooh, squirrel." And then, no, I asked you to make the appointment, didn't I? Because I was doing something at the time, and I went, if you don't do it now, I'm going to forget again. So I got you to make the appointment for me. Yes. And so made the appointment, and I had a telephone appointment, and the doctor literally spoke to me for 3 minutes and was like, "I'm going to put you on a referral." And I went, "Okay, cool. What happens now?" And they were like, "Yeah, you're referred, but there's a 3-year waiting list." And I was like, "Okay, that's a while." She was like, "Yep, that's what it is." And I went, "And there's nothing else I could do?" And they're like, "No, there's nothing else you can do. 3-year waiting list. I'm really sorry, but that's just what it is at the moment." Until I found there was something you can do. You go online, and there is basically like I'm not promoting these people because I know nothing about them other than this is what I'm doing. So I'm just explaining my process, no promotion, because I don't know anything about them yet. But until I went online, and because we heard about something of it's almost like a private network that deals with stuff based for the NHS. So you don't have to pay for it, but it technically is a paid service, but they do it through the NHS.
Yeah.
And when I started speaking to them, they were like, "We can have you an appointment February next year."
Mm-hmm.
Which at the time it would have been 5-6 months. In comparison to 3 years, I was like, cool. So I then started going through them, got some paperwork, went to my doctor. Doctor had to do a referral form, and I've basically got an appointment sorted.
Amazing. I need to do the exact same thing using, because that's the right to choose campaign,
psychiatry
through
UK
psychiatry.
or something, yeah.
For any UK people, right to choose psychiatry UK. Throw those words at your doctor if it's because essentially the problem is a lot of doctors don't know that that's there, but B, they're not. If the doctors suddenly start pushing that ends up with waiting lists like the regular stuff has got. So yeah. It's just like there's one, and I can never remember the name of this, but it's through the Department of Work and Pensions, where if you're in employment or even self-employment, you can get this sort of 6 to 9 month personal mental health care plan done, which the aim of it is to try and keep you in work.
Interesting.
Yeah, and it's free, and it's paid for by the department. Well, I say it's free; it's paid for by our taxes.
So you are paying for it. You just don't know.
Yeah, you're already paying for it. It's subsidised. It's like, so there's that. But yeah, right to choose through Psychiatry UK. And again, I've been meaning to do that for months now. But I think everyone on my podcast has already heard me say this a bunch of times. So sorry if you're bored of it. But actually, I'm not, because these things need talking about. Yes. Is that it took me a long time to build up the energy, like when you said you're a Queen kind of regularly pushing you're going to do it, and when I did speak to my doctor, I had another invalidating experience because they were giving me a full health check, and thanks to COVID and the gym being closed and me turning back to food for comfort again a little bit.
Who doesn't know?
Well, I know, but all they were concerned about was my blood pressure and my weight. And I'm like, look, I'm an ex-personal trainer. I can deal with that bit. What I can't deal with is this ADHD side of things, which and they were just like, well, let's focus on this first, and let's monitor that for the next few weeks, and kind of. And they were like, we'll do a follow-up appointment. That never happened. No. But so literally I know that I need to go back and go into that room, or if it is into the room, into that phone call with one agenda and only one agenda, being, I want to talk to you about ADHD. I know this is how much it is currently impacting my life. Yeah. This is what my work balance is like right now, which is more pronounced than ever. But And it's like this is what I said before, is that it's unreasonable to the level of which we have to advocate for ourselves.
You got to push for yourself, massively.
And it's almost not that I know. So I mean, first of all, there's a lot of people on the internet that think that self-diagnosis is valid, and I agree. But like yourself, I'm a little bit more cautious than to jump straight into a self-diagnosis. So which is why whenever people say I have suspected ADHD, I mean, I get invited onto this ADHD chat panel like every month. And it's like I'm not even sure I'm supposed to be here. But weirdly, it's like, I can relate to every single thing that everyone's saying.
Yeah.
But yeah, but yeah, anyone who is listening is right to choose and Psychiatry UK. If you if you basically say to your doctor, I would like to be assessed more quickly, and I know that this is possible through Right to Choose and Psychiatry UK. First of all, if you've got the bottle to say that while you're in there, it's like, if not, email your doctor and say that, because there are other pathways available when you are in the UK. And it's knowing these and using these is important.
That's the main thing, isn't it? It's knowing about it. I think if it wasn't for, funnily enough, if it wasn't for TikTok or social media, I wouldn't have known about them. I think it was literally, I came across a TikTok video where a person was like, do you know, I went to try and get an ADHD diagnosis, and this happened. And then I found out about this because I did some research. And they were like, they had to do a lot of research to find it. It wasn't like it was just like instantly like, how can I get diagnosed for ADHD? Like, Google it. It was like, it was really big. Like, they had to, chase it down. And then they were like, and thankfully they were like, I'm gonna have to like spread the word because people need this.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I got air quotes for anyone who's just listening. I got diagnosed by Beat Cleaver from our chat. He didn't actually diagnose me. It's just he came on to talk about. By the way, he's absolutely amazing, and you should actually get him on for an interview.
Yeah, that'll be cool.
He worked for years with people with autism, varying communication needs. And the interview that I did with him, it's on YouTube and it's on the podcast. It's all about how he's a beatbox, so that's one other way of communicating, like making noises, copying each other, mimicking each other, and all the rest of it, communicating through that. But this was never intended to be the topic of conversation on our podcast, but about 80% of it ended up being about that there's always a way to communicate. And like what you said with Dante, it's like if he's got access to your hands, or like you're learning and you're discovering ways to communicate. And it's just that it's not the way we communicate. And like that's why I always think that neurodivergence, we tend to like talk to each other like we've known each other forever. And this came when we spoke for the first time last Saturday on your podcast. I think that was about 3.5 hours, and it was supposed to be 2. It's like that's what happens. And it's like, yeah, we're like old friends. And I knew today was going to be exactly the same. I'm gonna hand over to chat a little bit. That's sort of the end of my main questions. I will say one more thing, which is two more things actually. Where can people find more about you, let's get them directed towards Queen as well, because
exactly. If you want to find more, if you want to come and check me out, I'm on Twitter. It's Kings_CRT. The CRT does stand for court, even though most people think it stands for crit. But yeah, there's that. There's Twitch, TikTok. It's all the same. It's all Kings_CRT everywhere. But I'm mainly over on Twitter and Twitch. I'm building my YouTube up. Our podcast is going to be on YouTube soon, and then it will be on Spotify as well.
Amazing. And the last thing is, as I say, sort of any parting advice for the podcast listeners?
When it comes to being a parent, or even looking at yourself, be open-minded. We're constantly being put into boxes, and whilst you're whilst in essence looking for a diagnosis is trying to put yourself into another box. Be open-minded. I for ages just got into the mindset of I was hyperactive. I wasn't the same as everyone else, but that didn't mean I was ADHD. I was just hyperactive. And a couple of the things got a bit worse recently in the last sort of year to 2 years. My forgetfulness, and I stutter quite a lot now. because there's like a disconnect between my brain and my mouth. So I am just starting to be open-minded, and I think it's mainly my kids, because I'm being open-minded towards them and their needs and how to be pliable to what they need. Mm-hmm. I'm probably starting to be a little bit more pliable to myself. Queen wants to say something.
Of course. Cassindra's been waiting for this moment, by the way. I've seen it in chat.
Hi.
Hi. Cass has been wanting you on camera the entire time.
No. Hi, people.
You're so short.
I know. One thing that I think that there's a lot of sort of people that think that when you have a child with neurodivergence, that you need to make them fit into the mainstream. There is a lot of work that makes your children go into mainstream and to make them fit into the normalities of a neurotypical life. And that's not how it should be. Thank you. What you need to do is don't automatically listen to like, oh yeah, well, your child shouldn't be doing this, or you need to do this to fix your child. Your child is perfect as they are.
Yep.
There is nothing wrong with your child if they have a neurodivergent, quality. They are fantastic as they are, and it is part of them. It doesn't mean that they are, a burden. It doesn't mean that they are more challenging. It's just what you need to do is find what works for them, like you would do with any other child. What works for them? What is their strength? You nurture that. You love them for who they are, and you make sure that you tell everyone else that if they've got a problem, that's their problem.
The system needs to accommodate
them. The system needs to be accommodated to them and their needs, as you would with a neurotypical child. But I think that people get this bogged down that if you have a neurodiverse child, instantly you have to sort of rearrange them. But if you had a neurotypical child who is maybe, had different strengths and weaknesses, you would cater to that. But I think the word neurodivergent automatically makes people think, well, we've got to try and fix this.
Yes.
And that's one thing. Just make sure that you don't let people, and even with your kids growing up, make sure that they know that they don't have to fit a mold.
Yeah.
They make their own mold, and everything can fit around them, and they look after themselves and love themselves.
Absolutely. It's down to the way that the word diversity has been diluted over the last 10 years, because when most people say diversity, what they mean is we want to tick boxes, but essentially we want to get more women in, but we want them to act like men. We want to get more black guys in, but we want them to act like white guys. We want to get more gay people in, but we want them to act like straight people. It's like that's what they want to have all the representation, but they want the representation to think and sing off the hymn sheet of what is not diverse in the slightest. When in reality, and the same, it's like as you've just said, then we want this neurodiverse person to act neurotypical, and that's not diversity. Diversity is we want all of these different types of people to be all of these different types of people, and rather than you're both into music, right? Because I know King plays a guitar, right? So rather than us all singing the exact same bloody note, that isn't harmony. We want actually harmony of all of these different musical notes and all these different instruments together to create a beautiful, amazing piece of music. Not we just want one note playing dun 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 dun. It's like,
exactly.
Well, that's a good foundation sometimes. It's like
you've got the starting blocks. Now look like everyone else, and that's a huge thing. I think there's so many. It was like when we took Dante, and they wanted to put him through the ADOS assessment, but the ADOS assessment isn't for autism. But they didn't want to give a diagnosis without giving it. And so they wanted to have check boxes.
Even though he couldn't talk.
And a prerequisite for the ADOS was you had to talk. But they really wanted him to fit the boxes. And even being diagnosed, you have to tick the boxes to be diagnosed. But yeah, there's a huge, and I think there's some brilliant resources and information out there. And speak to people with autism, with ADHD, with any neurodiverse sort of neurodiversities. Speak to them. I'd rather speak to anyone that is living firsthand knowledge of it and understand from their point of view. And it's not going to be the same for everyone. Everyone's going to have their own experiences and thoughts and feelings on it. But speak to them rather than someone who's trying to put you in like, oh well, you're not quite like child A, so. And this is what Dan was saying earlier, where you don't really follow the milestones too much because it's so variable on all of them. But yeah, just give your child, just find what works for them. And I don't want to swear on your stream because it's daytime.
Go for it. No, it's
whilst you can listen to the professionals, take it with a huge fucking handful of salt because they don't know your child like you do.
Yeah.
And you are going to be the only one that's going to be there, and you're going to be the only one that's going to set them up for the rest of their lives with the strategies, the mechanisms that's going to get them through when they face things when you're not there. And believe in yourself. I spent so long being so upset, so angry, so worried that I wasn't going to be able to do, and I still have bouts of it where I get so worried that I'm not going to do what my child needs because I don't know what the future is going to bring. Obviously, I've got my own experiences, my own, childhood traumas, baggage. I suppose, and adage, and you always take your baggage and get a little bit onto your kids. But I try desperately not to let that get in the way. I really want to make sure that I've set them up with the best things that's for them, and that's not going to be the same for everyone. And that's it. I think that's my bit. So
wait, before you jump off, because you've just reminded me of a question I was meant to ask King earlier, but you're getting it instead. It's it's basically because you've both got the same experience in this, is that you have two neurodiverse children. You've got a neurodiverse brother. King's got a neurodiverse brother. And I take it, based on what society tells us, that all four of those people are like exact carbon copies of each other, and there's no differences whatsoever because autism looks just one way. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I think I mentioned this in your chat earlier. People either expect you to be like Rain Man or to be completely off the charts, like, you're either super, super unbelievable genius with autism, or you are so severe and complex you can't even get up out of a chair. Like they have there's no in between. There's no, with the masking, people really still struggle today to see the masking. My little girl, you meet her, she's bubbly, she's lovely, she's friendly, and it's not until you start to see the little nuances, and then you start to see the frustrations, and you start to see she's very vulnerable. She has no concept of danger awareness. She will walk off with a stranger that holds his hand out, but she's lovely. She'll chat to you. You can talk to her, and you wouldn't instantly think there's autism there.
Yeah,
you wouldn't. And even we took her in preliminary because her speech was quite delayed, and I was obviously a bit worried because of the family experiences and history. And the doctor was like, no, it's fine. You're probably just overreacting. And so I did. I was like, I'm probably just projecting. I'm projecting, and it doesn't look like. And I grew up with it. My brother he's fine. He lives independently. He's had jobs. He's done university courses. And he's, if you met him, he kind of was, I hate to say lucky, but he was kind of lucky. The generation that he's only just about 30. He turned 30 this year. So the generation he sort of came up in was kind of had the gamers, so that more introverted, the people that would rather stay in and chill out with their mates indoors and play games. And that was kind of, you just have sort of the introverts, the shy kids.
As autism was becoming a thing, wasn't it?
Yeah, and autism was only really starting to become a little bit more accepted. I mean, my parents had to fight for 3-4 years to get him the diagnosis. But yeah, but he found his niche in gaming. It also meant that he could sort of involve himself in it. He didn't have to socialize too much because he struggles with sort of the socialization aspects, with really communicating with people, especially people he doesn't know. So that kind of helped him. He could speak to people on a level through gaming, but he didn't have to physically interact and feel uncomfortable and feel outside of his comfort zone. But if you met him, again, you probably, if you really knew the condition, you would understand it. You would be able to identify it. If you didn't, you'd just think, he's just some sort of shy gamer guy.
Yeah.
But there's so much diversity on the spectrum, and so many people who wouldn't even realize that they are potentially on the spectrum until perhaps they get their children diagnosed and they start to go, I do that. I do that. And so there's not much understanding. And even with medical professionals, they take one look at your kid and they go, that's probably not. They'll blame the parenting. They'll blame that you're not got enough routine in, or that you need to read more, socialize, just put your kid. force your kid into a situation that they're not equipped or ready to deal with. And that is far more damaging from what I've been talking to other people about. Like, thankfully, ABA isn't so much of a thing over here anymore, but I know it is still a big thing in the States, where they effectively, with children with autism, behavior that they don't approve of, they literally sit there and ignore the child. They do not interact, and the child could be crying, screaming, and they'll show no emotion. They won't react at all because they're trying to correct the behaviors. So, and that is entirely damaging. If your child is crying, they are communicating to you that they need something, but they're trying to correct it by introducing more damaging sort of habits, which is only going to manifest later in life, to be honest. So take your time with it and give them all the cuddles. And even if it doesn't seem like with Dante, he doesn't understand it now. He does still get told off when he does something naughty, but we don't just like tell him off and then just put him in his bed. You know, it's the same with Allegra. If they've done something naughty, they get reprimanded. They need to understand actions and consequences. We have that from the very start, but we also have the cuddling time, the quiet time, the calm time, and we talk after, and we make sure we give them the exactly. Sorry, I've just seen the comment. Autistic behaviors are not wrong. They're not. They are just behaviors, and they are communication. They are the only way of communication that your child has.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Amazing.
I'm going to bugger off and let King.
Oh, thank you very much. That was awesome.
Sorry. Sorry.
Right, everybody. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to end the podcast portion of that here, which doesn't mean that we're ending the stream. It means that I'm just ending the podcast portion here. So what I'm going to do there is I'm going to thank both King and Queen for being on. And I am sure this will not be, well, I'm not just sure, I'm completely and utterly certain this will not be the last time you see either of them on the stream. So everybody, can we have some exclamation mark love, exclamation mark hype, exclamation mark thirsty, all of that stuff up in chat. Exclamation mark avo at the minute, because or neuro, because they're all spooky now, because it's October. I was about to say it's Halloween. It's apparently, it's according to the internet, it's Halloween for 31 days.
You say it's spooky. We're like this all year round.
Well, yeah. So everybody, and Cass, can we have a shout out up in the chat for King? Like, just for the sake of actually having a bit that actually does end well on the podcast, rather than me cutting myself off mid sentence. Thank you very much for joining me, King.
Not at all. Thank you for having me.